Fractures in LA's black-brown political partnership. And where do we go from here? Don't miss The Tape, 1 year later. Only on KBLA Talk 1580, Monday, October 9th, live from 5 to 7 p.m. with an immediate encore presentation from 7 to 9 p.m. We've got a lot to talk about.
1, 2, 3, go! Try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Yeah. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit TheTavisSmileyShow.com. That's TheTavisSmileyShow.com or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with the noted historian and author Eli Merritt about disunion among ourselves, the perilous politics of the American Revolution. We will explore the lessons from this critical period in American history that resonate today with contemporary challenges. In our third hour, a conversation with the co-founder of the Compton Cowboys, Randy Savvy. Straight out of Richland Farms in Compton, California, Randy Savvy grew up as an equestrian with a thing for cowboy hats, country, and rap music. These days, he's the king of what's called street country. We'll talk about street country, his collaboration with Dr. Dre, and how he ended up opening the 2022 Academy Awards program. And if I know Randy, we'll also talk about combating stereotypes and inspiring self-sufficiency in the black community. That said, in this first hour, two more conversations. On the B side of this hour, a dialogue with Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, on this, the 11th Annual National Voter Registration Day, a massive nationwide effort to register voters ahead of state and local elections, as well as, of course, the presidential primaries. That on the backside of this hour. We commenced, though, today's program talking about this summer of strikes with the noted labor leader, Kurt Peterson. Kurt, good to have you back on the program, sir. How are you today?
Good morning. My pleasure, Tavis. Thank you for inviting me back on.
It's good to have you on the program. Let me start by asking just a broad question. How would you frame this summer of strikes that we are in right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're clearly in a wave of labor unrest and stemming from, I think, actually the pandemic. I think during the pandemic, whether you were a grocery store worker or an auto worker or a Hollywood worker or a hotel worker, that pandemic showed workers that while they were in pain, laid off, or doing double the work, or watching their families die from COVID, at the same time, CEOs were doubling their pay and earning more and more. And coming out of it, I think people are just hungry and frankly, they're desperate in a certain sense, because if we don't make more, we won't be able to stay in our homes. So I think that has led to this historic wave of strikes from Hollywood to now the auto workers. It has spread across our country. I think we're in a really, really special moment.
Was this predictable, Kurt?
Well, I think it was predictable in the sense that inequality, as we know, the rich are getting richer, and those who work are not keeping pace. And inflation, of course, has added another added element to that. So I think it was predictable in the sense that workers were falling behind. I think the pandemic just accelerated and exposed those, the anger of people and the dramatic differences in what people are making. I mean, when people are, buying 2 or 3 houses and others can barely afford to pay their rent, there's something wrong. And that has been, of course, unfortunately, endemic in our economy. But I do think the pandemic just brought it out in a way that has made people furious. I mean, our members, our room attendants to bartenders, I've never seen them more active, more militant, and more determined to win their fair share.
How would you respond to folk, Kurt, who say that, to your point about the pandemic, what the pandemic really did was to make American workers even lazier? Those PPP checks made a lot of folk lazy. What came out of that is what we now refer to as the Great Resignation. Folk were getting more from those PPP checks than they were getting from their full-time jobs, so that ultimately what happened was that the pandemic made American workers even lazier.
Yeah, look, I think that's a silly analysis. I think what really happened during the pandemic is that employers got enormous subsidies, paycheck protection program from the federal government. Hotels received $14 billion in subsidies to, quote, keep themselves afloat. Not a single CEO or upper C-suite manager lost their job. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of hotel workers lost their jobs and were scurrying around doing gig work and everything else to keep themselves afloat. We saw here in Los Angeles, more than half our members are thinking about or have actually moved further and further away from their workplace in order to find more affordable housing. People didn't get lazier. People are working really hard. And when they came back from the pandemic, what they ended up having to do is work even harder. People showed up and they were had to do more work, not less work. So this idea that working people became lazy, it's insulting, it's offensive. And frankly, the folks who made bank during this pandemic are the C-suite, the CEO, folks. And that's why auto workers are on strike. That's why hotel workers are on strike. And that's why actors and writers are on strike.
For so long, the political refrain regarding the labor movement in this country has been that labor is on life support. Well, apparently labor is waking up, and all across the country, as you heard Kurt say a moment ago, from Hollywood to Detroit. Workers are striking and fighting back and saying that enough is enough. Just getting started in this conversation about this summer of strikes with Kurt Peterson. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat in the Lex since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Feel it, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450 mile range on a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection consistent with the CHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and, they're putting their money where their mouth is at, So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community. And, you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase and, give them, another look if I go to another institution. I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right. Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
The City of Los Angeles Emergency Renters Assistance Program will start accepting applications at 8 a.m. on September 19th. The program will provide up to 6 months of rental arrears to low-income residential renters who are at risk of homelessness due to unpaid rent as a result of COVID-19 or other financial hardship. Learn more at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org.
Dominique DePrima here. Having a good credit score is one critical step to obtain a loan to buy a home. But did you know that your credit score is just one factor in getting a mortgage loan? Think about this. Lenders also consider your income, your employment history, current monthly debts, the size of the loan, and the amount of your down payment. Whatever your financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives support you in reaching them. Access your personal financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Mayfresh Daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley in dialogue with Kurt Peterson, longtime union activist who currently serves as co-president of Unite Here, Local 11. Kurt, I'm wondering how you feel about these declarations. As I mentioned moments ago, there have been declarations for quite some time now about the death of the labor movement. Were those declarations premature?
Yeah, I mean, look, I there's no question in the private sector the unionization rates are low. I think it's like 8%. It's higher in the public sector. But and there's reasons for it. I mean, there's the migration of manufacturing to other countries, our feeble and inept labor law, and the employer's desire and to destroy unions, honestly. But at the end of the day, workers right now are standing up in numbers that haven't been seen in decades. I mean, the number of workers on strike, the number of workers who are trying to organize, whether it's Starbucks, Amazon, it is remarkable. I do think we're in a moment. And moreover, that the latest Gallup poll showed that 70% of Americans support unions. They believe that unions are a solution for inequality. And I believe that too. And I think workers at this point, especially in Los Angeles, where they can't, where rents are out of sight, people can't afford to live in this city. There's no choice. I mean, either you stand up and fight or you move out. And folks are, in my view and in my experience, are standing up and fighting.
Why do you think that in these strikes so far, the side of the owners, the management side, has been so unrelenting? I hear the point you make earlier that 70% of Americans believe that unions are a good thing, and yet there seems to be no relenting in the UAW strike at the moment. They've said that if something doesn't happen by Friday, they're going to step it up. We know the strike here in Hollywood, where this show is flagship, is unrelenting at the moment. So if everyday people, 70% of us, believe that unions are a good thing, why is there so little progress that is being made in these negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, I'd point to a couple success stories. The Teamsters won a historic agreement for UPS drivers. Over 300 workers will receive, I think it's a $5, $6 an hour raise. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. So there's an enormous win there. I also think that Hollywood, I mean, that is about, whether or not writers are going to be able to write or whether computers are going to write. And they're at this existential moment for their careers and for, journalism and the work, honestly, that you all do so well. And so I think owners realize that this moment is important to them too. If they lose control, if they allow workers to win, they will, I think they're going to know that the next fight that workers are going to demand more. So I think we're at this moment where the owners get it too. The fight is on. The solidarity is an all-time high. That's the other thing I'd say. It's here in LA, in particular, between the writers, the actors, the hotel workers, the solidarity, the being at each other's actions, walking the strike line together. We have members who are front desk agents at a hotel, and they're writers in the Writers Guild, and they're on strike in both places. So I think owners are going to fight because the demands are so high and the consequences are so significant. So that doesn't surprise us. This is what they always do. But we believe, as we always do, that we'll last one day longer and we're going to win.
What does this summer of strikes mean for the perennial fight for 15?
Yeah, I think 15 is kind of done. I think we got to go to 25 or 30. We're trying to pass laws here in Los Angeles, as is SEIU for healthcare workers, for $25 an hour minimum wage. You can't live on $15 an hour in Los Angeles or any urban area, I would argue. 25 puts you in the ballpark of maybe being able to, pay for a decent apartment if both spouses or partners work. But that's what we got to be shooting for. 15 is in the past. We need 25 or 30. I'll just say that room attendants in housekeepers in New York hotels make $40 an hour. Room attendants here in Los Angeles make as little as $20 an hour. That's got to change. I realize New York is a higher cost of living, but we're real close. And the only difference is that those employers here are resistant to giving those wages. It's not that they don't have the money; it's that they won't give it. So it can be done. We have examples of it, but 15, we can't be talking about 15 anymore.
What does, again, this summer of strikes mean for organizing? You mentioned organizing efforts at an all-time high. What's it mean ultimately, you think, in the future for organizing in L.A., in New York, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, in New Orleans, across the country? What's it mean for organizing in the days ahead?
Yeah, I think those who don't have a union are feeling the same pressures as those who are fortunate to have and belong to and be members of a union. That is, they're feeling the crunch, the economic crunch. They're feeling the increased amount of work that they're being asked to do as we come out of this pandemic. And they're also feeling that if they don't change things, there isn't much of a future here if they don't get more. So in LA, we've gotten more, outreach from workers than I've ever seen in my career in the last 30 years. I saw a worker the other day on the street who had a housekeeping uniform on. I had our strike shirt on, and she came up to me and she said, "I work at this hotel. How do we join?" I don't think that's happened in a long, long time. If anything, these strikes have lit a fire under all workers that they can actually do something. And restaurants, too. We're getting workers from restaurants saying, hey, how do we start this up? So it's really exciting. It's fascinating, and I think it's an historic moment, hopefully an inflection point. I can say in L.A. that if we don't get enough wages that people can live in their homes, the housing crisis that we have right now will get worse and worse, which it seems impossible, but that will happen. People need to earn more money, period, flat out.
Yep. The data is starting to indicate that these strikes all across the country are impacting the economy at a level not seen in decades. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's some that argue that it will spur on inflation, that as wages go up. You know what? I'll start worrying about that when CEOs have to cut their pay. The auto workers are very clear. They're saying, look, CEOs' pay has increased by 40%. We want 40%. Here in the hotel industry, the CEO of Hilton makes $10,000 an hour. A room attendant at a Hilton makes $20 an hour. We need to cut that ratio down. That it's not right that someone makes 500 times more than somebody else per hour. That is not how our society can and should be built. It's not sustainable. So when we see that the CEO pay starts coming down or that ratio starts decreasing significantly, then we can start worrying about whether there's a deleterious impact on the economy. Right now, the money is there. We're looking for our fair share.
Let's talk about that CEO ratio. There's no doubt about the fact that over the years, the ratio between CEO pay and worker pay has it's expansive and has continued to grow for decades now. And yet, just because I want to play devil's advocate here, what's your best argument, Kurt Peterson, for why CEO pay and worker pay should be equal, should be equivalent? And I ask that in part because I've been both. I've been an owner and I've been a worker. And as a worker, you take you go to work every day, you do your job, and for that you ought to be paid a fair wage. As an owner, you're taking risk, you're putting your money up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So give me your best argument for why CEO pay should in fact be more equivalent to worker pay.
Yeah, if you look at countries which have less inequality and have less poverty, honestly, and less unhoused, such as Western European countries, Japan. It's, the CEO ratio, the ratio of pay to CEO pay to worker pay is much lower. I think it number one, it improves morale of all workers, because when we tell workers your CEO is making $10,000 an hour, they suddenly their morale goes down. They're not as likely to work as hard. Number one. Number two, it's just unfair. It just the inequality breeds.
But I'm the owner, Kurt. I'm taking all the risk. I'm giving you an opportunity to make a living, but I'm taking all the risk as the owner.
Well, the CEO doesn't take that much risk, right? He has shareholders that he's responsive to. So I hear you if it's an entrepreneur who's doing something unique, some project that they're doing, and they put all their money. But that's not what CEOs do. They rotate around from one company to another. These boards are hardly independent, and they just pad the CEO's salary. Sure, if the stock price goes up, then that's how they increase their wealth. Mm-hmm. However, if stock prices go up at the expense of workers, then our communities break. Our communities become less livable. We have higher crime. Parents, too many of our workers have two jobs. I don't know how you go from one job to another, sleep an hour in your car between jobs. When do you spend time with your families? Like, how is this good for our society? I guess if CEOs made a lot of money and their workers made a lot of money too, I wouldn't have a problem with it. The problem is that the workers don't make enough. They don't make enough to provide for their families, to spend time with their families, and we all pay for that. You can only live in a gated community for so long, and that's what they do. But as soon as they step out, they're all subject to whatever happens in our society.
Yeah. Let's talk about the politics of this summer of strikes. And I don't want to color this too much. I want to give you as much room as you need to express yourself. But clearly we are in a political season. The presidential primaries are literally just around the corner. I mentioned today is National Voter Registration Day. We'll talk to Andrea Haley on the backside of this hour about today being Voter Registration Day in this country. But broadly speaking, how do you see the politics on this summer of strikes?
Yeah, look, President Biden is probably the most pro-union, pro-labor, pro-worker president in the last 40 or 50 years. I respect him. I think he's trying. I think, however, it's not enough. I mean, just weighing in on different labor disputes and trying to settle them is good. We need a president like FDR who walks the picket line with workers. I think that would show where the president actually stands. The other thing I'd say is, sadly, as we all know, the Republicans, with their economic, their fake economic populism, are drawing unionized and working class people to their side. And that's because the Democrats, even though he has the rhetoric, they don't often walk the walk, meaning they don't increase the minimum wage. There's not a fight about that. You don't hear about that in Washington. I get it, the Congress is dysfunctional, but that's not the fight that's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. It should be. You don't hear about the president and his staff, again, walking on picket lines with workers, being there literally with them as they fight. So I think the Democrats are, missing the boat on this one, especially now, as you said, when we have this wave of strikes and discontent and inspiration too. People are inspired to want more. If Biden could tap into that, he'd be on his way. What I fear is that the Republicans and Trump, they're smarter, they're shrewder, they're liars, but they figured out how to use the cultural issues to draw people in, and then talk about China as if they're magically going to change everything, and that's unfortunate.
So I closed my eyes as you were talking about Biden on the picket line. I can see in my mind's eye the president on the picket line. Optically, I get your point. Politically, strategically, what would happen in this election season were he to do that?
I think it would show working people where he stands. There's nothing more powerful than seeing someone who is important in our society with a picket sign in their hand, walking with workers and being in that camaraderie and solidarity. I think he needs to do it, honestly. Barack Obama actually walked with us prior to him becoming president at a strike we had in Chicago. And that was meaningful to us. Our members never forgot it. We stood by him in Nevada and every place else he went. I think the president here has an obligation right now in this moment, as you have articulated, to stand with workers. And what better way to do that than to come out and walk on a line? I mean, the vice president, bless her heart, she has avoided some of our struck hotels here. She, put out a message. It would have been great. We had asked her, we said, hey, come on and walk with us. She couldn't do it. But I just think that would be powerful. I think that would send a message. Rhetoric is one thing. Walking the walk is another.
And if I said to you, just again, playing devil's advocate, that Biden doesn't have to do that because when it comes down to Biden versus Trump, y'all going to support him anyway. You're going to canvass for him anyway. You're going to give him money anyway. You're going to vote for him anyway. Why put himself out there optically and strategically to get whack-a-mole by the right for doing it when y'all ain't got nowhere to go anyway, Kurt?
He's going to get whack-a-mole by the right anyway. It doesn't matter what he does. They blame him for the rain, for the storms, for the floods. It doesn't matter. What this is about is how does he appeal to working-class people? And Democrats are having a hard time with that. Stepping up and being on their side. Again, you can give a speech, but if he walks those picket lines, I don't see what he has to lose. I mean, sure, the right's going to – what are they going to do, vilify him more? It seems impossible to do that. But what we're talking about is folks in, working-class people, and they're not all white. Brown Latinos are moving, unfortunately, the wrong way. We've seen this in Arizona and in the Midwest. We need to have him stand with workers right now more than ever. It would be in his best interest, and it would refocus the conversation on what matters to people right now, which is, how am I going to pay my rent?
Yeah. Here's my exit question with 60 seconds to go. Is this summer of strikes sort of an outlier, or do you see this as the new normal in this country?
I'd like to think it's the new normal. I mean, there is a question of, there's a labor shortage right now. So, we have more leverage. Working people have more leverage, and unemployment's low. So there is that. But I have to believe that this is going to catapult us into more and more fights. It's clearly caught on, union after union. It's not just in unions, as we talked earlier, Starbucks, Amazon, et cetera. So I think it's going to continue. I know here in Los Angeles, I'll just speak for Los Angeles, we're looking to the World Cup and the Olympics. Our city's going to be on the main stage of the world, and we want workers to have their fair share, because if they don't, those events won't happen the way everyone's hoping they will.
Tip O'Neill once said that all politics is local. So whether you're in L.A. or Philly or New York or Chicago, New Orleans, Dallas, Houston, anywhere, these strikes this summer have gotten all of our attention, and I think deservedly and richly so. Kurt Peterson is a longtime union activist and co-president of Unite here, Local 11. Kurt, good to have you on. All the best to you, sir.
Tavis, keep up the great work. You're really doing amazing stuff. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks for your time. Today is National Voter Registration Day, a conversation with the CEO of Vote.org, Andrea Haley, when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Obesity is a growing contributing factor in heart disease deaths. Research published in the Journal of the American Heart Association shows that it was cited on death certificate 3 times more often in 2020 than in 1999. The highest mortality rate was in the Black community. The CDC says obesity, which is a major risk for heart disease, affects 115 million people in the U.S., including more than 1 in 4 adults. The Powerball jackpot is soaring with no grand prize winner in Monday night's drawing. The latest rollover means at least $672 million will be on the line come tomorrow. The cash value on that works out to just over $320 million. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Seeing a sick-alert working as you travel in Bellflower, the 91 East, just east of Lakewood Boulevard. We have a crash with only the right lane open at this time. We're stop and go from Alameda. Looks like this is an ongoing investigation. Cars in a collision on the 405 North approaching Wilmington is onto the right shoulder, but we're loaded up from Long Beach Boulevard. The 405 North headed towards Culver City around Howard Hughes Parkway. Look out for a stalled vehicle onto the right side here. Troubles on the 710 South at Imperial Highway. That's Southgate, a wreck onto the right shoulder from earlier. And South LA on the 110 South at Gage. Look out for a crash onto the right side in this area.
Hey, if you're thinking of getting the latest iPhone, you need to stop and check out the insane, amazing wireless offer from Boost Infinite. To learn all about it, just pick up your phone, dial pound 250 and say Boost Infinite. That's pound 250 and Boost Infinite.
Between the drivers, walkers, and bikers, there's a lot happening on California roads. Remember, safety is sharing. Safety is caring. Share the road, share the responsibility, and go safely, California. From the California Office of Traffic Safety and Caltrans.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. Those of you who watched the NFL's Monday Night Football last night heard Snoop Dogg in the new intro song. Snoop is part of the new opening the NFL came up with to kick off the Monday night telecast. Snoop will be featured every week in the new opening with country music star Chris Stapleton and drummer Cindy Blackman Santana. Some troubling news and numbers for the Chargers. Chargers head coach Brandon Staley said there is no timetable for running back Austin Eckler to return to the lineup. Eckler missed Sunday's loss at Tennessee with an ankle injury. He was hurt in Week 1 against Miami. As for the numbers, the Chargers have scored a combined 68 points in their first 2 games and have yet to commit a turnover, but they are 0-2. Something is not adding up. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like watering your lawn during the hottest time of the day and leaky faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
To some, this might sound like a typical family dog. But at Dog Chow, we know that for a veteran suffering from PTSD, this could be the sound of life-saving therapy.
Thanks, Betty.
That's why we've made it our mission to connect every military hero in need with a canine hero of their own. To learn about the simple ways you can help Dog Chow in our mission, visit dogchow.com/veterans.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Conversation now about today being the nation's largest voter registration day. It is, in fact, the 11th annual National Voter Registration Day. Our guest is Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, and I'm pleased to welcome Andrea back to this program. Andrea, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. If I complained, I'd be an in great. I'm glad to have you on. Just had a spirited conversation with Kurt Peterson about this summer of strikes that we are in, and it's hard to disconnect this summer of strikes that impact everyday people from everyday people being registered to vote. What do you make of this particular and unique moment in American history where you're trying to get folk to participate in the process?
Well, I mean, I think we're in an interesting moment in time. And I was just saying to somebody earlier today, this is not a fire drill. This is the real deal. We have seen the erosion and backsliding in our democracy. And the answer for that, in many ways, there are many different tools in our toolbox, but voting is one of the sharpest. So one of the big ways that we can really get out there and push back and make sure we have a healthy and thriving democracy and protect access to the ballot box is to, make sure we're registered to vote, and that we get our friends and families registered to vote, and then we translate that into collective action on Election Day.
Let me throw 3 or 4 things at you, things I'm sure you've heard before, but I want to just put a sharper point on it, to use your word, and get your response. I want you to play the devil's advocate here for a second. So how do you respond to people when you go about your work and witness who tell you that voting is overrated? It really doesn't change anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it didn't change anything, people wouldn't be trying so hard to keep us from doing it. I think that all you have to do sometimes is look at the intentionality of others to know what direction you need to take. And after the last presidential election, where we saw record voter turnout in the United States of America and so many Americans accessing their right to vote, what did we see on the heels of that? We saw 400 voter suppression bills crisscross the nation, aimed directly mostly at Black and brown populations and at young populations in general, trying to really, 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 1 million people at a time, reshape and recut what the electorate looks like. That was what was attempted to do. And the way to do that is to separate people from their right to vote. So the best way sometimes, if you're feeling dejected and don't know what to do, the best way to know what to do is look at those who would look to suppress and oppress you and see that their intention is to make you feel exhausted, to make you feel like nothing matters, to make you feel like the process is too hard to navigate so you won't have a voice, because your voice is the only way that they can be held accountable.
Mine is just one vote. One vote can't make that much of a difference, Andrea.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in races all over the country, we've seen just a handful of votes make a big difference. So I think famously, she's been in the news lately in Colorado, member of Congress. Lauren Boebert won her last election by a small percentage of the votes, like 1% of the vote or 500 votes or something like that. Very, very small, just a few hundred. And she's in a race again. You'll see state legislators who, I think famously a few years ago in Virginia, it was a tied vote. They literally had a coin toss. So because nobody knew what to do. That was the old rule in the books, that they had a tied vote. So one vote definitely made a difference. And in local elections all across this country, you see that a handful of voters really can make the difference on who's, elected and to be a judge, who's elected to be your mayor. All of that. The presidential can feel overwhelming, but every time you think about that, think about who's your governor, mayor, who's the prosecutor, like what is happening at the local level, who's on your school board, making decisions that really govern how the policies by which you and your friends and family are going to live.
The system is broken and it's just too dysfunctional. Why participate?
Well, you can't ever unilaterally disarm, right? And I think that's the big thing there. I won't say that our system can't be better. I won't say that we don't, that we have the epitome of what a healthy democracy looks like. But I will say that the only way to make it better is to invest in the long term. We know if voters show up in 2 or more elections, they're more likely to become a lifelong voter. And we know it's important that we have to on-ramp this next generation into access to the ballot box. So I think the answer to fixing a difficult system is not to just let the system run all over you. It's to stand up, have your voice heard, demand change, and then use all the tools in the toolbox to make sure we're all civically engaged and that leaders are truly afraid to disappoint us and take away our rights.
Washington, D.C., and state capitals all across the country are really bought and bossed by big money and big business, period, full stop. Voting doesn't really make a difference. It's owned, it's bought and bossed by big money and big business.
Well, at the end of the day, it's really owned and bossed by the people who elect the leaders. If people are afraid of disappointing their voters, if they're afraid that a large number of people will show up and vote against them in election, they'll be afraid to to create policies that would harm, our communities. I think that the big thing, yes, there are several different things that I'd love to see in our democracy. I'd love to see Citizens United, which allowed a flood of money into campaigns. I'd love to see that, overturned. I think that but every day we all have to think about what are the things that we can control and what are the ways that we can show up and make sure that that we're all joined together and showing up. I think that the only way to counterbalance to some of the negative that is out there is, the participation of every eligible American, and then demanding on the other side of that changes in the way things are run.
It's the 11th Annual National Voter Registration Day, and Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, is our guest. Back to my list of pushing you on this issue of voter registration. The voting process, Donald Trump is telling his supporters, is rigged anyway.
Well, I mean, we know that he's, this is a person who was pushing, called down to Georgia and said, just find me 11,000 votes. I mean, this is somebody who's pushing a lie of elections not being secure. We just had the safest, the last presidential elections and most secure election in recent history. And so I think that the thing here also is just to make sure it's easier to protect elections and the integrity of elections when you have higher numbers of people participating, because then usually you have people who you can't skew something in one direction or another, and you don't have the most radical of people showing up. And I think the average Americans, all want the same thing. They want free and fair elections. They want kids to be able to go to school and go to good schools. They want outcomes that are better, even better for the children than more for them. So that is I think that's a common thread there. And I think that the only way to move forward is to make sure that we're deeply invested in elections. And hey, if you want to get out there and do something about it, become a poll worker, volunteer, drive people in your neighborhood, let everybody know when registration dates and deadlines are. You can go to vote.org and do that. Celebrate National Voter Registration Day today with me and get 3 other people to register as well. And participate to make sure that elections are free and fair and preserved into the future.
When we come forward, and before we move forward to some other issues I want to cover with Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, I got one last body shot, one last body blow. It's something called gerrymandering. Why does voting really matter as long as gerrymandering is the order of the day? We'll talk about that and more when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
ready for extreme heat in your area. On days when extreme heat is expected, take action to keep your home as cool as possible. Set your air conditioner to 78 degrees. If AC isn't available, close blinds and curtains on all windows and run fans counterclockwise. Or find your nearest cooling center. Transportation help may be available. Learn more at heatreadyca.com. Brought to you by the state of California.
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home. Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth. No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
So, Andrea Haley, there are a number of things I think that are threatening this very democracy. There are a number of items I could list that I think are existential threats to this so-called democracy. And yet, at the top of that list, or certainly near the top, would be the issue of gerrymandering. Why does voting, registering to vote, matter? Participating in the process matters so long as certainly at the national level we have this thing called gerrymandering that makes it very, very difficult to get anybody out once they get in these so-called safe districts.
You're absolutely right, and that's an excellent question. Gerrymandering is a huge issue all throughout our country in many states, and you're seeing some of these maps get challenged in the courts right now and overturned. I mean, gerrymandering is obviously an effort to have people choose, have politicians choose their voters instead of voters choosing politicians. And I think the answer to that is in the question that you asked as well, because it's certainly at the federal level, but there are many elections going on simultaneously that go all the way down the ballot. So while it's important to participate, even if you're in a gerrymandered district, because on that ballot box, you're still going to have your local elections as well. And I tell people, when you look at some of the more frustrating things in our democracy right now, that the answer is always looking hyper-local and realizing that, that same election may have, like I said, judges and school board members and people who are down ballot, and gerrymandering doesn't apply to them. And I think that is the biggest thing. And in the meantime, raising awareness of how maps get drawn in the state, what the approval process is, does it go through the state legislature, who's elected to that state legislature really matters then for how maps are getting drawn, and then ultimately have to really support the people who challenge these things in court. I know that Democracy Docket and Mark Elias have done a lot of great work to challenge unfair maps, and I think that this is, that's the other thing we can do. So we have to think creatively about, okay, I have to register to vote, and then after I register to vote, like what else can I do, build, create, who can I support, and how can I get behind them, and how can I make sure that we have people in local office who will do the right thing.
I note that first observed in 2012, National Voter Registration Day is a nonpartisan civic holiday, as I said earlier, to honor our democracy. An estimated 5 million voters have gotten registered on this day, 5 million over the past decade. Millions more voters have confirmed or updated their registrations. I give that data as a way to show how successful this National Voter Registration Day has been. What's your goal in terms of numbers this year?
Yeah, this year, overall, Vote.org is pledging that in the next year we will register over 8 million voters across the country. We're doubling down on our efforts from 2020 when we registered 4 million voters. And this year so far, we're right. We haven't even, truly gotten started, and we've already registered 200,000 voters. And on National Voter Registration Day today, I was just speaking with our team, and it looks like we're registering about 13,000 voters every 30 minutes right now. Part of that may be that this morning Taylor Swift did a big shout out to Vote.org and people getting registered. And there's several other influencers are doing it all throughout the day today as well. And we're partnering with a ton of schools and different companies to also tell people to go to Vote.org and register to vote. But it's exciting to see that there's momentum happening, and I can't wait to look at the numbers at the end of the day.
Registration is one thing. Participation is something altogether. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Andrea Haley, we'll tackle that issue. It seems to me that in this next election, given how tight these polls are, assuming that Biden and Trump are the nominees, assuming that we have a repeat of this tete-a-tete between these two old white guys. Registration will be one thing. Participation, though, is another thing. Turnout is going to matter. We'll talk about that when we come forward. Andrea Haley on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for education as a right, not a privilege. Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science is a private, non-profit, community-founded, student-centered university committed to cultivating diverse health profession leaders who are dedicated to social justice and health equity for underserved populations. CDU does this through outstanding education, clinical service, and community engagement. Recently, Charles Drew University made history by opening only the 5th medical school at an historically black university. Congratulations, South LA, and congratulations to the dean of the medical school, Dr. Deborah Protho-Stith. CDU is now training doctors and providing $90 million in annual economic benefit to Watts and surrounding neighborhoods. To apply for medical school, get more information, or sign your child up for the Junior Doctors Saturday School program, visit cdrewu.edu. That's cdrewu.edu. At KBLA, we are dedicated to equity in education and ending healthcare apartheid, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, this is LA City Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to the 28th Annual Central Avenue Jazz Festival on September the 23rd from 11 to 7 p.m. For nearly 3 decades, the Central Avenue Jazz Festival has paid homage to the legendary Central Avenue and its influence on jazz history. Jazz, blues, and Latin jazz will be featured on 3 stages of music. Co-headlining are Hubert Laws with special guest Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. Parking is limited, so Metro and rideshare are recommended. Hubert Laws with special guests Eloise Laws and the Billy Childs Quartet featuring Sean Jones. The day includes plenty of food, merchants, and 4 pavilions focused on youth programming, art, health and wellness, and public resources. For more information, visit CentralAveJazzFest.com. CentralAveJazzFest.com. See you on the 23rd.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Our remaining moments now with Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, the nation's largest nonpartisan digital voter engagement organization, given that today is the 11th annual National Voter Registration Day. We were talking moments ago about registration being one thing, participation being something altogether different. One of my favorite lines, Jesse Jackson's had so many great lines over his career, his storied career, but I've heard Jesse say more than once that too often we lose elections by the margin of our absence at the polls. That's a cold line. That's a Jesse Jackson line. That's a cold line. That we lose too many elections by the margin of our absence at the polls. Love me some Jesse Jackson. For what it's worth, I was looking at a poll just this morning, in fact, that found, this is a USA Today Suffolk University poll recently, that found that Trump wallops Biden among unlikely voters. There's no, not even close, among unlikely voters. Trump wallops Biden. This in a 2024 theoretical or hypothetical matchup. Trump wallops Biden with unlikely voters. That said, turnout is going to be everything in this next election, given how tight these numbers are. Again, Vote.org is a nonpartisan organization, but I ask you, Andrea, given your efforts today to register people, what say you then about not just registering them, but about that line between registration and participation?
Well, I think, you're so right to point out that there's a difference between registering to vote and then actually casting your ballot. We're one of the only countries in the world that has a whole registration process that is so separate from the voting process in and of itself. But what we do at Vote.org is we think that to make sure that people are actually getting to the ballot box, that continuous conversation is the key. Continuously talking about voting rights, doing voter education in states, that the key is that year-round engagement. So while we're going to be registering thousands and thousands of people today, we're not going to just drop the ball and stop having the conversation and then pick it back up 2 months before the presidential. What we're going to do is send text alerts and email alerts, letting people know what's going on in their local elections, how they can turn out. We're going to send people all the information that they need to vote ahead of the election. So things like, can you vote with your student ID in your state? Can you not? Can you vote by mail? Can you not? When does early voting start? All of that is a continuous communication that we have at Vote.org with the people who use our platform to register. And because of that, we have an 81% conversion rate from registration to the ballot box. So I think that should be the key, no matter who you are or what program you have. I think everyone should be talking to each other about voting year-round.
I've got 60 seconds left. Tell me how you think we're doing on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great, 1 being horrible, when it comes to making it easier to vote in this democracy.
Ooh, it depends on the state. It's a state-by-state analysis these days. We see some states that are really, passing pro-voter legislation, and others that are severely rolling back voting rights. And the rollback and the most intensity is happening in places where the demographics are changing, like Georgia and Texas and Florida, states like that. So I think it just depends on the state. If you're living in Colorado, you're in a great situation with like a 9 out of 10. And if you're living in Indiana, you've got like a 3 or a 4 going on. So it really depends.
Yep. Indiana is my home state, so that was a little embarrassing, but I digress. Andrea Haley.
I'm in Indianapolis today.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, you're not too far from my mama's house. You want some good food, go holler at Miss Joyce, and she'll take care of you while you're there. Andrea Haley is the CEO of Vote.org. Today is the nation's 11th annual National Voter Registration Day, a good time if you've never registered to vote to do that by going to Vote.org, or also a good day to update your registration if you've moved or anything like that. Today's just a good day to handle all matters concerning voter registration. We're going to need your vote in this next election. Andrea Haley, thanks for all the work you're doing, and good to have you back on this program. All the best to you, and have a successful day today.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Obesity is a growing contributing factor in heart disease deaths. Research published in the Journal of the American Heart Association shows that it was cited on death certificate 3 times more often in 2020 than in 1999. The highest mortality rate was in the Black community. The CDC says obesity, which is a major risk for heart disease, affects 115 million people in the U.S., including more than 1 in 4 adults. The Powerball jackpot is soaring with no grand prize winner in Monday night's drawing. The latest rollover means at least $672 million will be on the line come tomorrow. The cash value on that works out to just over $320 million. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Seeing a sick-alert working as you travel in Bellflower. The 91 East, just east of Lakewood Boulevard. We have a crash with only the right lane open at this time. We're stop and go from Alameda. Looks like this is an ongoing investigation. Cars in a collision on the 405 North approaching Wilmington is onto the right shoulder, but we're loaded up from Long Beach Boulevard. The 405 North headed towards Culver City around Howard Hughes Parkway. Look out for a stalled vehicle onto the right side here. Troubles on the 710 South at Imperial Highway. That's Southgate, a wreck onto the right shoulder from earlier. And South LA on the 110 South at Gage. Look out for a crash onto the right side in this area.
Between the drivers, walkers, and bikers, there's a lot happening on California roads. Remember, safety is sharing. Safety is caring. Share the road, share the responsibility, and go safely, California. From the California Office of Traffic Safety and Caltrans.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. Those of you who watched the NFL's Monday Night Football last night heard Snoop Dogg in the new intro song. Snoop is part of the new opening the NFL came up